Good morning, Mashi.
Good evening, Dennis. How you doing?
Good. I'm going to go for a quote today that is very difficult to properly attribute. And it's a saying I'm sure you've heard, and a lot of people try to claim that they're the person who said this, and I don't know that any of them are right. But the quote or idiom I'm going for is a problem shared is a problem halved. I want to get your take on how you feel about communicating in a business relationship or in a personal relationship or in a romantic relationship your issues and trying to figure out when sometimes people want solutions and sometimes people just want to feel heard, because sometimes the having this isn't necessarily many hands make light work. Sometimes it's just about feeling heard and listened to.
I think, boy, there's so much we do a whole month on this. There's so many aspects of this idea of a problem shared as a problem have. One you touched on, which is just getting it out of you,
Mm-hmm.
having someone to hear from you. In personal life, in business life, even if it's not with a person, sometimes you're carrying that stress and anxiety with you. It's not even associated with the solution to the problem, but you've got this background stress, anxiety, nervousness. And if I just go, yo, Dennis, man, here's the deal, man. One of the dogs is sick. And it's
Mm-hmm.
nothing to do with work, nothing to do with anything. I just want to tell you about it because I'm carrying that with me every day. I'm on edge. And if I get it out, at least you can support me around me and say, God, why she's got such a short temper these days? Now you know, right? I used to
I'm
make you
very
do
guilty of
things.
doing this, of procrastinating and kicking the can down the road and keeping things to myself. And it comes to light a lot for me when I go to bed, and I'll have this, this to-do list of items in my brain, right? And
Yeah.
it doesn't matter how big it's sorry, it doesn't matter how big any of the individual items are. In those moments when you're by yourself in bed or in the shower or whatever, they all look exactly the same. And it's much more about quantity than it is about individual size. But I'm much more, and I think having worked with you professionally, I think you're similar to this. You're like, oh, yeah, I got to deal with that thing. Well, we'll put that away for a second. Let's deal
Yeah.
with this now. Crap, I got to deal with that. This, and those
Yeah.
things really do start to build up and weigh on you. And that's deviating a little bit from sharing. Usually that's, problems, like you said, one of the dogs is sick, that those other person can't necessarily help you with. But it is the same sort of thing about shouldering everything by yourself is much, much, much heavier.
It's funny. Those little things normally pop up when it's like 3 in the morning. All of a sudden, it's like, oh wait,
Never
I was
sent that
supposed to do
email.
this.
Yeah.
I got it. Yeah. Oh yeah. That's how it hit me. But I do think another, like I said, a part of that, a problem shared is a problem halved, is the idea of like getting it out there, even if you're not looking for a solution, being heard, as you've already said, and then two, making those around you aware. Hey, I have this problem that's going on. It makes it easier to deal with, because a lot of times I think, similar to what you're saying, shouldering that weight on on ourselves, carrying that alone, we try to protect that. I don't want to talk about it. I'm not going to tell anyone about it. No one's going to know. And that takes a lot of psychic energy. Keeping secrets takes psychic energy.
Well, you
And
get, it's
so,
that old jokey thing of of like, if you ever use marijuana and you're like, does everybody else think I'm high? It's that kind
yeah,
of thing. You're like, oh, I'm really struggling at work. And like, God, is that making me cranky? Can the people around me tell that I'm in a pissy mood as a result? And you start devoting energy to thinking about the thing.
yeah. And that's the other thing that you want to get out of there. But the other key part of that for me is, I mean, you ever do this? You're like, oh, dude, so we got this issue. Let me break it down for you. And about halfway through, you're like, oh, God, never mind. I just figured it out. Like the number of times that happens where just explaining the problem, just laying it out, particularly in a work context with someone from work, like, yeah, we got to blah, 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 blah. And all of a sudden you're like, oh my God, I think I just figured it out.
Well, it's because you're trying to head them off at the pass. So you'll go, but I don't know what you're going to say. You're going to say this, that. Well, actually, maybe that's right. Hang on a second. You ever heard of rubber ducking?
No.
It's a thing a lot of I think it's an old like meme almost sort of thing that a lot of software engineers and developers will do, where you'll have like an inanimate object on your desk, like a rubber duck, for example. And if you're trying to figure out, you're like, okay, this data flow should go like this and this and this and this, and it's breaking and I can't figure out why. You'll pick up the duck and you'll try and explain the concept to it. And in trying to dumb it down and make it understandable for the duck, you will elucidate what was going wrong with it. And that's kind of what you're talking about, right? This idea that if I
Yeah.
try and explain something to you, I have to have a different understanding of it, coming at it from a different angle, which will highlight solutions to me that weren't necessarily present when I was stuck in the weeds with it.
Yeah. I think it's just, our old GM, Joe Sinsky, used to say, you got to walk around the pool table, look at all the
Mm-hmm.
shots, get up and walk around and get a new angle, get a new perspective on it. And of course, explaining it. I mean, you know this, you're a teacher. Explaining things, is one of the best ways to really engage with them. Trying to teach someone something, trying to walk them through the thought process, how you got there, what stumbling, excuse me, what stumbling blocks you have and why they're stumbling blocks, starts to break down that problem from a whole new perspective. And it's not quite a fresh set of eyes. It's not, but it's refreshing your look
Mm-hmm.
at it. And of all the things with a problem shared as a problem halved, I really think that's the key one. Explaining it, revisiting it, seeing what it is, and then understanding in a personal context why you may have a personal issue with it, in a professional context, what those professional stumbling blocks are and how you can build past them. That's the part. It's in the explaining. It's not. And then I guess the other thing you mentioned, which I really don't think is cuts to the heart of the issue, is the many hands make light work. I mean,
Nah,
that's
that's not really what we're
sure.
talking about
I
here.
get
Yeah.
it. If I say like, hey man, I got to be out of my apartment next week, and
I can
you and
only
a bunch
pack
of the
so many
boys come
boxes
over
an
and help
hour,
me
right?
move,
Yeah.
right? It does make it easier. Like literally packing alone versus having you come over and help me pack. We have halved the problem, I
Right, but
guess, because
we're not
we've
talking
doubled
about
the
me coming
person
over to
time.
pack. We're talking about you telling me, God, I gotta get out of here by next week. End of
Yeah.
transaction, right? That's what we're talking about. And I think there's something you mentioned, like, well, walking around the pool table, different perspectives and stuff like that. I think things balloon in your brain, right? When you're the only person thinking about something, you're subconsciously making mountains out of molehills. And by telling somebody, by forcing yourself to be a little bit more objective about it, at least enough to be able to speak about it, it can cut it down in size hugely sometimes.
God, that's
Because
huge. That's such a great point, by the way.
pulling it out of your
Really
psyche,
a
it's
good point.
way
Yeah.
objects in the rearview mirror may appear larger than they are. That is exactly what is going on. Where by the time you actually said it out loud, you're like, yeah, it sucks, but maybe it's not actually that big of a deal. Like I can deal with it. And lifting that off your chest by being able to talk about it really, really does recontextualize it. There's a weird thing about this with our cat, Yuri, where Nikki and I will say, and this is very, very true, Yuri is a normal sized cat. He's probably on the smaller side. Yuri looks very small outside because he's indoor a lot of the time and he's next to a couch or a coffee table or a stack of books. But when he's outside, he's next to trees and cars and roads. And by talking about a problem with somebody else, you're taking it outside.
Yeah. I mean, I think that's really interesting. I've never thought of this Yuri analogy is interesting.
Well, that's because I just said it. That's not like that's not going to show up on any quote page unless I go and type it in now.
No. But it's really interesting. The perspective on it is so important. I think to myself of the number of like, oh God, I got to have this talk now, or I got to say this now. And you go in there and it's so much worse in your head.
Mm-hmm.
And you're like, oh, hey, dude, check it out. We got this. Like, okay. Like, wait, that's it? Like, yeah, no, that's fine. We can totally do that. It's cool. You're like, wait a minute. Like,
it's definitely true when you're
I've been building this thing up.
When you're thinking of telling somebody something, because it's not just that, like, oh, your brain will imagine the worst possible thing they could say. It'll imagine every possible thing they could say, some good, some bad. And the bad ones will stack up and together will feel much worse than even the worst possible thing, I think, a lot of the time. And you're like, there's a phrase in like a teaching nowadays, which is that procrastination is a form of self-harm. And that's true in some ways, because if you're anxious about something, by procrastinating it, or in this case, by keeping it secret, all you're doing is prolonging the anxiety portion of the event you're worried about. Not actually, you're not going to change the conversation you have to have. You're not going to change any of the fallout. None of that's changing. All you're making worse is the part that only affects you.
Yeah, and I mean, well, that's not true, because sometimes you can procrastinate and actually make.
Well, sometimes the universe will make a decision for you. That's true. Yes,
but I'm just saying sometimes, like, why didn't you tell me this like a week ago? That would have been way better. And you're like,
that's fair.
Yeah, I guess that's true. But more than anything, I like the explaining in terms of what I mentioned was like the explaining gives you that solution. Okay, it gives you that solution. You get to rework it. You get to walk around the table and look at it. But I think the real humanistic side of this notion of a problem shared is a problem halved is that we are social creatures. Mm-hmm. We are a community. Empathy, I think, is the most important human characteristic, the defining kind of like human characteristic. What it means to be truly human is to have empathy for those around you, for yourself, for each other. And I think this is the core.
I think it was you that told me about this. I'm seeing this as a meme on TikTok a lot lately, is what the first indication of like human society
Oh yeah.
is archaeologically, and it's like a healed femur,
Hmm.
because that's a debilitating injury, makes you completely, almost entirely useless from like a
Useless to
tribal
the herd. You're useless to the
perspective.
herd.
Yeah. But if you're not left behind, if you're well, kept brought along and cared for and fed, you can become useful again. And we're
Yep.
talking like hunter gatherer thousands of years ago
Hmm.
times. Um, and that's an indication of that human empathy, that sociological, societal, tribal element. And you're right. And that, I mean, that problem can be, oh, I'm worried about this talk I have to have with my girlfriend, or I'm worried about this promotion I'm up for at work, or I'm worried about where we're going to find our next stack of berries or woolly mammoths.
I think we're gonna we're gonna deviate,
Sure.
divert here for a bit. I was just having this conversation last night with someone. We were discussing work, and she was struggling with a tough decision. I was like, well, what do you want to do here? Hims and haws, hims. I was like, okay, so I already have my answer. You want to do the difficult thing. Okay, you just don't want to say it.
Mm-hmm.
And I said, you know what I think the number one trait of leadership and management is? She said, no, I said empathy. Empathy is it. If you want to be a strong leader, if you want to be a powerful leader, if you want to be a someone that people will follow and trust and grow with, you need to have empathy. And I said, other people and other times, people will be like, you need to be able to make the tough decision. You need to
Mm-hmm.
be able to make the tough call. You need to be able to do that, be objective, make very hard decisions that are going to affect people you care about. If you're working with people, I hope you care about them in negative ways. A lot of people say that's number one. The reason I say empathy is number one is you cannot approach those difficult decisions and have those hard conversations in a truly effective manner if you don't have empathy.
Mm-hmm.
You must have the empathy, because a lot of people go out there, fire people, critical feedback that's not constructive, and just bang, 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 and like, yeah, I'm so great. I can make these tough
I'm
decisions
making hard calls,
unintentionally.
right? Yeah.
Yeah, good for you, bully. If you don't embrace empathy as the foundation for making those hard decisions, you're gonna max out. You're gonna cap out.
I know you used bully in the like Teddy Roosevelt, like bully for you kind of way, but it was a very choice selection of
Oh, it was
words
good.
in that
It was
scenario.
really good, wasn't it? The brain's
Well,
always working, baby.
I know, right? Well, Mashi, I hope you go out today and be empathetic, and I hope you go out and shoulder a lot of half problems for people.
I'm there, baby. Message me. Anyone who wants to share a problem, I'll help you cut that thing in half. Likewise, Dennis, go out there. As I always say, be wonderful to yourself, be wonderful to each other. That's how I close all the streams I'm on, because it's my call for empathy. So go forth and do that and have a great morning.
Very Bill and Ted.